Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Coinbase Research, XRP, is next in line for ETF approval. That's the headline from Daily Coin, and that may very well end up being the case. And I'll explain exactly why they're speculating that may be the case. It's coming regardless. As far as I'm concerned, it's a virtual certainty. You are going to get a spot XRP approved, probably a bunch of them, this calendar year, potentially, well, actually technically could be any day, but the next deadline for multiple XRP ETFs is actually about halfway through October. We'll get you the specific dates a little bit later in the video, but it's coming. It's definitely going to come. I think that the SEC is just kind of getting their ducks in a row and making sure that they have, they actually did have some work to do here, making sure that they have regulatory framework in place that they can apply consistently to every single application. And I think that's the reason that we've been seeing delays on this. They want to get their ducks in a row, make sure that's complete, and then they'll approve all of these things. But they made it very clear. The war on crypto is over. The market deserves these things. And so, yes, it absolutely makes sense. But I also want to highlight exactly why this matters. And if we get this approved during the XRP bull run, talk about adding fuel to the fire. But I don't think that most people realize the degree to which this is going to be highly consequential for positive XRP price action. Potentially some in the short term, but as I always say, I'm most excited about what this is going to mean for the price of XRP over a span of years and decades. It's like the amount of money that'll flow, it's just going to be completely absurd. It's unknowable what the figure is at this point, but given how early we are in the adoption of crypto, there's a lot of opportunity for upward mobility here, price-wise. So, yeah, if you are purchasing XRP in 2025, even if it's hovering around $3, you are buying it cheaper than almost any human who will ever exist. Can you imagine a decade from now? Tell somebody a decade from now that you were able to buy XRP at $3. They'll be like, oh my God, I wish I had that opportunity. You must be rich. That's the type of thing. It's the same as people that, years ago were buying XRP at like $1,000 or even less than that. It's the same type of thing. It didn't seem cheap at the time. $1,000 XRP, oh my God, or Bitcoin rather. Oh my God, $1,000 Bitcoin. It didn't sound cheap at the time. But then it ran to $124,000, and $1,000 sounded pretty good. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I'm not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. According to the latest report by Coinbase Institutional Research, there's over 90 exchange-traded fund applications, or ETF for short, of course, on the United States SEC's table right now. And according to Bloomberg's senior ETF analyst James Seifert, hundreds of crypto-related ETP launches are coming in the next 12 to 18 months, which could easily include one of XRP ETF pitches. Now, like I said at the outset of the video, I think you're going to get a bunch approved, even if they're not all literally on the same day. Because that is what happened with Bitcoin. They all, whatever, I can't remember how many it was, 10, 11, 12, whatever it was, Bitcoin ETFs, they all got approved on the same day. That could happen here. I'm not necessarily counting on that. But I do think ultimately you're going to see a bunch of these things get approved, if not literally all of them. Anyway, according to Coinbase, multiple XRP ETF applicants have freshly amended their SEC filings, which is a strong sign of eventual approval. And there you go. That right there, and they're not kidding. So fine, this is a bit of speculation, but it's healthy and reasonable speculation so far as I'm concerned. The fact that there are updated applications, well, what would trigger that? Well, that almost certainly means that there's some amount of conversation, good faith conversation, between the SEC and any firm that's filing for an XRP ETF. That is what would prompt an amendment in their application filing. That's why people are looking at this going, oh, okay, we're actually making progress here with these spot XRP ETFs. And so, yeah, speculation, but pretty damn reasonable speculation if you ask me. Which XRP ETF products have advanced the furthest? Per multiple analysts, Grayscale's XRP ETF submission on January 13th, 2025 has a strong edge. A decision is to be made by October 18th, 2025, while Grayscale's flawless track record with the already established Bitcoin and Ether ETF highlight suitable qualifications for an XRP-based spot ETF. And then they go on to cite a couple other ones here, 21 shares and also Bitwise's, and the deadline for those are October 19th and October 20th this year. So that'll be coming up too. So it's possible Grayscale, I mean, if they're going to be ready to approve it, and I don't know if they will for sure, but it could be the case that Grayscale ends up getting first mover advantage, even if it just benefits them for one day. We'll see how quickly they launch it too once approval. It's probably fast, would be my guess here. And by the way, I'll just mention this here. I don't really need to read the article, but Grayscale XRP Trust NAV surges over 400% in a year. And I knew what this is going to lead to. I talked about this last year. Grayscale launched an XRP Trust. Now, it actually wasn't their first XRP Trust. They had one going back like half a decade ago, but after the SEC lawsuit, they liquidated the damn thing, unfortunately. And it's a shame because the trust is literally back. So you buy the trust, and you have to be an accredited investor, but it's backed by actual XRP. So it did result in more XRP flooding the market when there's already a bunch of fear. So it didn't, not that it was like a huge thing, but it's one more thing. It's not good, just in general, including for XRP price. But I said, look, they're going to come back ultimately once that lawsuit's over. They're going to launch their trust again, and that is going to be the precursor to launching a spot XRP ETF. They're going to want to convert that. And I remember saying that at the time, and that ended up being the case here. And so September 5th, you can see here, they said today marks the first anniversary of the Grayscale XRP Trust. And earlier this year, at the end of January this year, exactly what I predicted would happen did happen. Here you can see the headline at the time from CoinDesk. Grayscale files SEC proposal to convert XRP Trust into ETF. And this is a big deal, folks. The reason that this matters if you're an XRP holder is because converting from a trust into a spot ETF opens up the doors for so many more investors. Because again, if it's a trust, you have to be an accredited investor. But if it's a spot ETF, you do not. You can just buy the product on whatever platform you're already using. And when that happens, a bunch of people who may not otherwise be into crypto, they're like, oh, I'm already on my platform and I can buy this thing and get more exposure. A bunch of people will purchase that. And that requires that the firm that issued the ETF back it with actual XRP. That's why it matters. You're opening up the doors to all sorts of people who maybe aren't interested in learning how to custody crypto themselves, but they do want some sort of exposure. So it's a great investment vehicle for them. Now, for people like myself, and I'm assuming pretty much all of you listening, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of interest in purchasing an XRP ETF because you probably, if you're like me anyway, you probably just want to hold the XRP yourself. But not everybody feels that way. And that's fine. And this is going to result in so much more XRP ultimately purchased. It's a huge jump in demand. So to what degree is that the case? Well, there was a great thread here by my fellow XRP YouTuber Jungle Inc. that I wanted to share with you. And it highlights exactly what happened with the Bitcoin spot ETF when it launched and what that could mean for an XRP ETF, given that the human behavior probably not going to be that different. It's a question of scale, so maybe you're going to make an argument that more would have flown in the Bitcoin because it's the one with the brand cachet and everybody's heard of that one. Fine. Either way, there's so little money in XRP right now, relatively speaking, it doesn't take much new money flowing in to get the price of XRP to double and triple and quadruple. So it's a benefit. The fact that there's way less money in XRP than Bitcoin, that's a positive. That means that there's still opportunity here. If the whole world had already bought XRP, ain't no opportunity, Not really. How much money would it then take to flowing into XRP just to get it to increase by like 50%, So anyway, here's what Jungle had to say. He said, what happens when XRP gets its ETF? If a spot XRP ETF is approved, institutional capital won't just give Wall Street exposure, it could fundamentally change XRP's market behavior. Look at what happened to Bitcoin after the launch of IBIT, which is BlackRock's ETF. And BlackRock, it's worth looking at theirs because they have the biggest Bitcoin ETF. And of course, BlackRock is the largest asset manager on the entire damn planet with something stupid like 11 trillion in assets under management, something like that. Anyway, and then he says Bitcoin price, which is the yellow line on your screen here, is still volatile, but IBIT's asset under management, which is the red line below it on the screen here, kept climbing, even during every dip. And so it's not that it never went down, but you can see it's closer to being flat than the yellow line, isn't it? That's interesting. So those investors are treating it a bit differently, aren't they? I think that's what's evidenced here, and that's pretty well what he's getting at. And then he says, the result, Bitcoin's drawdowns have been much shallower than past cycles. No 50% collapses. And I'll just pause to say this, fair enough to point that out. I think it is obvious, though, that from cycle to cycle, even without a Bitcoin ETF, you are going to see on average a reduction in well, I'd say both the percentage increases, but also to the downside, the decreases, you're going to see that it gets muted, because once there's way more money, and it's just harder to get to that type of price action. Then he says a constant inflow of capital has created a structural bid under Bitcoin. Institutional demand has reshaped Bitcoin into a more mature, stable asset class. Now imagine XRP with the same tailwind. Every dip met with institutional inflows. That's right, folks. Institutional inflows. XRP will be treated differently. So, and then he says a sticky capital that accumulates for the long term instead of fleeing at volatility. And folks, again, that's exactly what happened with Bitcoin. Not that there wasn't volatility. Of course there was, as you can see on the screen, but it was definitely muted compared to what you would expect just with Bitcoin. That's fantastic. That's fantastic to see, actually. And then he said a new floor for XRP's price and a shift from hype-driven cycles to sustainable Wall Street-backed growth. Bitcoin's ETF launch didn't just unlock demand, it transformed the market. An XRP ETF could do the same, rewriting the playbook for XRP's future. Bottom line, XRP has already proven retail staying power. Add institutional flows, and the story changes completely. Now, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. And yes, XRP has been around. It's existed now over 13 years. I think it's safe to say XRP made it. Can we agree on that? It's been 13 years. After 13 years, you're not still wondering, oh, I wonder if we're going to make it. If you launched a company after 13 years, is it probable that you're going to be wondering, are we going to make it? No, that's the type of question you have at the outset. I mean, yes, fine, businesses can start to crumble, so on and so forth here. But when you're talking about an asset like this, especially one where the fundamentals just keep getting stronger, it doesn't make logical sense to be asking, is XRP going to make it? No, bitch, you listening? It already made it. It already made it. It's no question in my mind. You should not be asking if XRP is going to make it. It's a question of how quickly other investors around the world on an individual level, a business level, an institutional level, in figuring this out. And then the more fun question is, as a result of that, as increasingly more and more find out about this, how much more money is going to flow in and how quickly? That's certainly interesting. That's a worthwhile conversation. And the answer, I mean, without a specific number, is a lot, like a metric fuck ton, basically, whatever that ends up being. So that's coming. But it's just, this is why I keep saying, this is the best moment in history to invest in XRP. And it's true, fine. It would have been better to have invested back, when it first got on an exchange in 2013. Fine, you can argue that, but that was way more risky. So the reason that I'm saying this is the best time ever to invest in XRP, this is my humble opinion, it's because, yeah, you're not going to have the same ROI opportunities if you literally bought it at half a penny. Duh, that's a no-brainer. I shouldn't even have to say that. But you also don't have that extreme risk. You have the benefits. Think about this. Here we have XRP, clearly an early winner of the crypto space, but there's still, in the scheme of things, not that much money in it. There was really not that much money in it, even with it hanging out around $3 as I record this video. But you don't have the same level of risk. And I'm not saying there's no risk investing in XRP or not making that. There's always a risk in investing in anything. But what I am saying is, it certainly seems obvious to me that it's way less risky than it was back in the day, because it's used for so many more things. And people value the technical attributes that XRP offers. It just freaking works. It does what Bitcoin can't. It works as a peer-to-peer cash system. It just works. You can tokenize stuff on it. Money market funds have been tokenized on the XRP ledger. Gold's been tokenized on the XRP ledger. T-bills have been tokenized on the XRP ledger. Bitcoin has been tokenized on the XRP ledger because that piece of crap doesn't work. Bitcoin is technologically the worst cryptocurrency ever created because it was the first. I'm still fond of it, but I like wording it like that because I know if a Bitcoin maximalist hears this, it's going to infuriate them. And that's the reason I word it like that. Because those people are the worst, most detestable people in all of crypto. So I do not care. But it's true. XRP Ledger, it just freaking works. So, look, I'm just telling you. We'll see what the numbers are as time passes. But my God, a boatload of money is going to ultimately flow into XRP as the years pass, and then ultimately as the decades pass. And it is just a blessing, as far as I'm concerned, to be in XRP this early in the game. I know it's been around 13 years, but in the scheme of things, that's nothing, folks. We are just now starting to play catch up after the price of XRP was artificially suppressed for practically half a decade because of the SEC lawsuit. Artificial price suppression. It's now ended. The war on crypto is over. XRP fundamentals never stronger, and more investment vehicles for XRP are coming. Spot XRP ETFs, they are coming. In fact, in one of these articles, actually I think it's this one. This is from Bitcoin.com. They were highlighting Polymarket, and they're putting the odds here of a XRP spot ETF approval in 2025 at 94%. I think demand's just going to be through the roof, honestly. And if this happens during the bull run, even though and I'll continue to insist, this more so matters over a span of years and decades, more fuel to the fire. If this gets approved while we're having alt season and XRP is running, it's just one more thing. More eyeballs on XRP, more news stories, more actual money flowing in. It all does matter. It all adds up. So yes, I'll be happy to see that. And that might happen. That might happen at the same time. So we'll see if we're fortunate enough for that to occur. But even without it, I will say XRP is still going to run ridiculously well for the duration of the cycle once you get into alt season. That's my belief. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say are right. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.